For 1,023 years, the walls of Constantinople had never been broken. 23 sieges had come and failed. Armies of Avars, Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Rus, and Crusaders had all stood at those walls and walked away beaten. The city was considered quite literally unconquerable. Then, in the spring of 1453, a 21-year-old sultan dragged the largest cannon ever built across 300 miles of mountain road and changed the world. This is the story of the fall of Constantinople, the siege that ended the Roman Empire, the siege that, in 53 days, killed a civilization that had lasted longer than any other in human history. If forgotten battles and the moments where history actually turns are what you come here for, the subscribe button is right there. Now let us begin. To understand what fell in 1453, we have to understand what Constantinople actually was. Founded in the year 330 by the Roman Emperor Constantine, it was built to be the new capital of the Roman Empire. While the western half of Rome collapsed under barbarian invasions in the 5th century, the eastern half, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, kept going. They called themselves Romans. They spoke Greek. They considered their emperor the direct successor of Caesar Augustus. And for over 1,000 years they ruled from the same city, behind the same walls, defending the same idea of a Christian Roman Empire that stretched in its great days from Spain to Syria. By 1453, that empire was a ghost. Centuries of plague, civil war, and the catastrophic Fourth Crusade in 1204, when Christian armies sacked the city for greed, had stripped the empire down to almost nothing. By the time our story begins, the so-called Byzantine Empire was basically just the city of Constantinople itself, and a few scattered fragments of land. The emperor, Constantine XI, ruled perhaps 50,000 people inside walls built for 500,000. Around him, like an ocean closing in, was the Ottoman Empire. And on the throne of that empire sat a young man who had been planning to take Constantinople since he was a boy. Mehmed II was 21 years old when he ordered the siege. He had become sultan once, at the age of 12, been pushed aside, and clawed his way back to the throne at 19. He was brilliant, ruthless, fluent in 6 languages, and absolutely obsessed with conquering the city. To him, Constantinople was not just a prize, it was a proof. Whoever took it would, by the standards of the medieval Islamic world, fulfill a prophecy that the city would one day fall to a Muslim conqueror. Mehmed intended that conqueror to be him. He started preparing in 1452. First, he built a fortress on the European shore of the Bosphorus, the narrow channel just north of the city, in a position to cut off any seaborne reinforcements from the Black Sea. Then he assembled his army. Modern estimates put it somewhere between 60 and 80,000 soldiers, plus another 20,000 irregulars. Cavalry, infantry, sappers, engineers. And his elite force, the Janissaries. Roughly 15,000 professional soldiers, trained from childhood, the most disciplined infantry in the world. But it was none of these that made the difference. The difference was the gun. The walls of Constantinople, called the Theodosian walls, were the most formidable defensive system on Earth. They were a triple line of fortifications. An outer moat, 60 feet wide and 20 deep. Then a low outer wall. Then a middle wall, much taller. Then behind it, the great inner wall, 40 feet high and 15 feet thick, with 96 massive towers. For 10 centuries, those walls had laughed at every army that came near them. No cannon in existence in 1452 could possibly break them. So Mehmed had a new one built. The engineer was a Hungarian named Orban. He had first offered his services to the Byzantine emperor, who could not afford his price. Then he went to Mehmed, who offered him 4 times what he asked. Orban cast a monster. A bronze cannon 27 feet long, weighing 19 tons, capable of firing a stone ball weighing 600 pounds over a mile. 60 oxen and 400 men were needed just to drag it. The barrel was so hot after each shot, it had to be cooled with oil for 2 hours. It could only fire 7 times a day. But each shot, when it landed, could crack open a wall that had stood for 1,000 years. On the 2nd of April, 1453, the Ottoman army arrived outside Constantinople. The siege began. Inside, Constantine XI had perhaps 7,000 defenders, 5,000 Byzantine soldiers and citizens, and 2,000 foreigners, mostly Italian. The most famous of these was a Genoese mercenary named Giovanni Giustiniani, who arrived with 700 professional soldiers in January 1453, just in time. The emperor appointed him commander of the wall defenses. The fact that the Emperor of Rome had to put a foreign mercenary in charge of his most vital defense tells you everything about how empty the empire had become. The bombardment started on the 6th of April. The walls had never heard anything like it. The first day, Orban's monster cannon cracked a section of the outer wall. The defenders worked through the night, frantically filling the breach with stones, earth, and timber. The next day, the cannon fired again. Again, the defenders patched it. And again. For 6 weeks, this is how the siege proceeded. The Ottomans pounded the walls by day. The Byzantines and their Italian allies rebuilt by night. Mehmed tried more than just guns. He tried digging tunnels under the walls. The defenders countermined, finding the Ottoman tunnels with cleverly hung bowls of water that vibrated when sappers dug nearby. They flooded the tunnels. They burned them. They captured Ottoman engineers and tortured the locations of other tunnels out of them. He tried siege towers. The biggest one was rolled up to the walls in a single night, a wooden monster taller than the battlements. The defenders blew it up before dawn with barrels of gunpowder. He tried to force the harbor, called the Golden Horn. But the Byzantines had stretched a massive iron chain across its entrance, supported by floating logs. No ship could cross it. So Mehmed did something so absurd it became legendary. He had his ships dragged overland. Greased planks were laid across a hill, and 80 Ottoman warships were hauled, by hundreds of men with ropes and oxen, up one side of the hill and down the other, into the Golden Horn behind the chain. The Byzantines woke up one morning to find an entire enemy fleet floating inside what they thought was their safest harbor. Even with all of this, the defenders held. They were starving. They were exhausted. They were hopelessly outnumbered. But the walls, even broken, were still walls, and the Italian crossbowmen at the breaches were murdering every wave of Ottomans who tried to climb in. By the end of May, after 7 weeks of siege, Mehmed's commanders were quietly suggesting he lift the siege and go home. He refused. He set a final date for an all-out assault. The 29th of May. The night before, the Emperor Constantine XI walked among his soldiers on the walls. According to the chronicles, he gave a short speech. He thanked the Italians for staying. He told the Greeks they were defending not just a city but a civilization. Then he went into the Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral at the heart of Constantinople, and attended the last Christian service ever held there. Catholic and Orthodox priests, who had spent centuries denouncing each other, prayed together. Soldiers came in straight from the walls, weapons still in hand, and took communion. Then the emperor went back out to the walls to die. The assault came in 3 waves, beginning 2 hours before sunrise. First, the irregulars, sent as cannon fodder to exhaust the defenders. Then, the regular Anatolian troops. Both waves were beaten back, with massive Ottoman casualties. The defenders were holding. After several hours, Mehmed sent in the 3rd wave. The Janissaries. The fighting was hand-to-hand on the broken walls. And then, 2 things happened almost at the same time. Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese commander, was hit by a musket ball or a crossbow bolt. The wound was bad enough that he had himself carried away to a ship for treatment. When his men saw their commander leaving, many of them broke. And at almost the same moment, a small sally port called the Kirkaporta, a side gate, was found unlocked. A group of Janissaries slipped through and raised the Ottoman flag on a tower. That flag was what finished it. Once the defenders on the walls saw the enemy banner over a tower behind them, they thought the city was lost. Some panicked. Some kept fighting. Emperor Constantine XI, last emperor of Rome, threw off his royal insignia so he could die as an ordinary soldier and charged into the fight. His body was never identified afterwards. He vanished into the chaos of his city's fall. By midday, it was over. Ottoman troops were pouring through the breaches. The streets ran red. There was 3 days of looting. by tradition the right of any victorious medieval army, though Mehmed cut it short on the first day, horrified by the destruction. He rode into the Hagia Sophia, walked up to the high altar, and ordered it converted into a mosque on the spot. The largest cathedral in the world for 900 years became a mosque, which it remained for the next 5 centuries. Mehmed was 21 years old. He took a new title that day, Kaiser-i-Rum, Caesar of Rome. He believed, and many in the Islamic world agreed, that he was now the rightful successor of the Roman emperors. He would spend the rest of his life trying to make that title real, marching west toward Italy itself. He nearly succeeded. The consequences were enormous. The fall of Constantinople is one of the markers historians use to date the end of the Middle Ages. Greek scholars fled west, carrying ancient manuscripts that helped spark the Renaissance in Italy. Trade routes to Asia were closed off, pushing Portuguese and Spanish explorers to look for new sea routes around Africa and across the Atlantic. Within 40 years, Columbus would land in the Americas. A direct chain of cause and effect runs from the canon of Mehmed II to the European discovery of the New World. And the walls themselves, those great Theodosian walls, are still standing in modern-day Istanbul. You can walk along them. You can put your hand on the patched section where Orban's monster cannon punched through. You can stand at the Kirka Porta, the little side gate that history forgot to lock, and look at the place where 1,000 years of Rome ended on a Tuesday morning in May. If you made it this far, drop a like. Tell me which forgotten siege you want next, and watch the Great Siege of Malta video on this channel, because the empire that fell on this day spent the next century trying to do the exact same thing to a tiny island called Malta. And what happened there is the reason any of us are speaking the languages we speak today. Until next time.